We talk about royal jewels as if they're shared. But some were never shared, because sharing them would have meant sharing the crown. Yes, we've watched heirlooms move from one woman to another, but Elizabeth II kept a handful of pieces so firmly at the top of the hierarchy that for 70 years they felt untouchable. In this video, I want to take you inside that forbidden corner of the vault, where a jewel is not just something you wear, it's something you are allowed to represent. And what makes this story irresistible is that we can now see the door opening, just slightly, and the rules beginning to change. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. Let's dive straight into the most significant category in our list. Inside the vault, there are pieces that Queen Elizabeth II regarded not as jewelry, but as her professional equipment. This is the uniform of the sovereign. These items are not intended for banquets, galas, or diplomatic receptions. They are reserved strictly for high constitutional duties, coronations, and the state opening of Parliament. That is why they remained completely forbidden to the rest of the family, because wearing them isn't about style, it is about doing the job of the monarch. And we must begin with the three pieces that define the official face of the British monarchy. We must begin with the piece that acts as the very face of the monarchy, the George IV state diadem. You likely know it intimately, even if you have never seen a photograph of it, because for decades it graced British and Commonwealth postage stamps, coins, and banknotes. It is arguably the most recognizable piece of jewelry in the royal collection, yet its origins are surprisingly masculine. It was created in 1820, not for a queen, but for a king, George IV. Known for his flamboyant style, the king commissioned Rundell, Bridge, and Rundell to create this masterpiece for his coronation. He wore it over a large velvet hat, adorned with an ostrich feather, during the procession to Westminster Abbey. It is amusing to consider that this delicate, feminine-looking circlet, now the symbol of the longest-reigning female monarch, began its life as a vanity project for an extravagant male ruler. The design itself is a masterclass in national symbolism. The frame, set with 1,333 diamonds, supports 4 crosses patée, alternating with 4 floral sprays. These sprays represent the United Kingdom, combining the English rose, the Scottish thistle, and the Irish shamrock. In the center of the front cross sits a 4-carat pale yellow brilliant diamond, a honey-colored stone that anchors the entire piece. Queen Elizabeth II treated this diadem with a reverence that bordered on the bureaucratic. She wore it for the first time at the state opening of Parliament in November 1952, the first of her reign, and continued to wear it annually for the journey to and from Westminster. It became her working uniform. This context explains why we never saw this piece on a sister, a daughter, or a daughter-in-law. It is strictly reserved for the head of state. There is a fascinating observation to be made about how she used it. Despite its beauty and comfort, it is a complete circlet sitting securely on the head. Queen Elizabeth II never wore the diamond diadem to a banquet or a gala. She understood that a crown, even one this elegant, is not evening wear. It is a badge of office. Now, the diadem has passed to Queen Camilla, who wore it for the state opening of Parliament in 2023, confirming its status as a jewel reserved exclusively for the woman beside the throne, or on it. The next piece represents the continuity of the bloodline, the coronation necklace and earrings. The existence of this set is actually the result of a bitter family feud. When Queen Victoria ascended the throne in 1837, her uncle became the King of Hanover. He immediately laid claim to the jewels that had belonged to their grandmother, Queen Charlotte. The legal battle raged for decades, but in 1857, the courts ruled against Victoria. She was forced to pack up magnificent diamonds and pearls and ship them to Germany. Victoria did not mourn the loss for long. She turned to Gerard and commissioned replacements. According to Sir Hugh Roberts, the diamonds for this new necklace came from swords and useless things lying about the royal collection. It is a marvelous example of Victorian pragmatism, dismantling obsolete ceremonial weaponry to create a necklace that would define the monarchy for the next century. Completed in 1858, the necklace features a row of 25 large cushion-cut diamonds, but the true focal point is the pendant, the Lahore diamond. This 22.48-carat stone was once part of the Lahore treasury in the Punjab region. The accompanying earrings are equally historic, featuring pear-shaped drops that originally hung from the armlet of the Koh-i-Noor diamond. This set carries a weight of tradition that few other pieces can match. It has been worn at every coronation since its creation. Queen Alexandra wore it in 1902, Queen Mary in 1911, the Queen Mother in 1937, and Elizabeth II in 1953. Most recently, Queen Camilla wore it for the coronation of King Charles III. When looking at the history of this necklace, a distinct shift in style becomes apparent with Elizabeth II. Queen Alexandra, in 1902, wore the coronation necklace as part of a stack, layering it with pearls and other diamond rivieres until she was encased in jewels from neck to waist. Queen Mary also favored a turtleneck effect of multiple colliers. Elizabeth II, however, took a different approach. At her coronation, and in the portraits by Cecil Beaton that followed, she wore the coronation necklace solo. She stripped away the Victorian and Edwardian clutter, allowing the substantial collet diamonds and the Lahore pendant to stand alone. It suggests she viewed it not just as decoration, but as a singular, potent symbol of her anointing. It remained one of her favorite pieces for state banquets throughout her life, but like the diadem, it was never lent. To wear the coronation necklace is to wear the history of the crowning ceremony itself. Finally, we turn to a piece that vanished from public view for the entirety of Elizabeth II's reign. This is Queen Victoria's small diamond crown. While it is technically available to the sovereign, it has effectively become a forbidden item because it was designed for a fashion that no longer exists. After the death of Prince Albert, Queen Victoria remained in mourning for the rest of her life. She found the heavy imperial state crown impossible to wear over her mandatory widow's cap, a specific arrangement of white tulle and veil that she never abandoned. So, in 1870, she commissioned Gerard to create a solution. Significantly, she supplied the diamonds from her own personal necklace, making this crown her private property rather than a state heirloom. The result was tiny, only about 9 centimeters across, and made of silver, set with 1,187 diamonds. It was an ergonomic masterpiece, weighing a mere 160 grams, designed specifically to perch securely atop that white widow's veil. This delicate, open-work crown became Victoria's signature. She wore it for the state openings of Parliament and in her official Golden and Diamond Jubilee portraits. It was so personal to her that, upon her death in 1901, it was placed on her coffin at Osborne House. Queen Victoria bequeathed the piece to the crown to be worn by future queens. Queen Alexandra managed to wear it, as she had the advantage of elaborate, voluminous Edwardian hairstyles to anchor it. However, after Alexandra, the crown fell out of favor. Queen Mary never publicly wore it. In 1937, King George VI decided to deposit it in the Jewel House at the Tower of London, where it remains on display. There is a practical reason why Elizabeth II likely never retrieved it. By 1952, both widow's caps and towering hairdos had vanished. Without that specific volume of fabric or hair to support it, this miniature crown presents a difficult aesthetic challenge. Perched on a modern head, it risks looking less like a symbol of empire and more like a toy, or a paper crown from a Christmas cracker. Elizabeth II, with her sharp eye for dignity, understood that this was a relic of a specific woman's grief, not a working tool for a modern queen. While the pieces we just discussed were restricted by the strict rules of monarchy, this next group was guarded by something far more powerful, the sheer force of personality. These are the tiaras that, while technically available to be lent, became so fused with the image of Elizabeth II that seeing them on anyone else felt, for decades, simply impossible. They were her signature pieces, a de facto closed collection. We must start with the tiara that is, quite literally, the face of the Queen. The Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara. If you have ever held a British £5 note or glanced at a coin minted after 1953, you have seen this tiara. It was the jewel chosen for the definitive portrait used on currency for decades. But before it became a symbol of the Elizabethan era, it was a sentimental family heirloom. It began as a wedding gift to Princess Victoria Mary of Teck, the future Queen Mary, in 1893. A committee of young women, calling themselves the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland, raised the funds to purchase it from Gerard. In 1947, when her granddaughter Elizabeth married Prince Philip, Queen Mary passed it down as a wedding present. Elizabeth, then still a princess, affectionately called it Granny's tiara. What makes this piece unique in the forbidden list is the duration of its tenure. Elizabeth II began wearing it in 1947 and continued to wear it until the very end of her life. It was her go-to choice for state banquets, tours, and diplomatic receptions. She wore it so frequently that it ceased to be just a piece of jewelry and became an extension of her person. For over 70 years, no other woman in the royal family touched it. It wasn't until October 2023, more than a year after the late Queen's passing, that Queen Camilla debuted the tiara at a dinner at Mansion House. It was a significant moment, marking the end of the mourning period for the jewelry collection. Yet, I must ask you, did it feel strange to see it? For many, seeing Granny's tiara on a new wearer is a moment of profound visual adjustment. It is a jewel that became so inextricably linked to Elizabeth II's silhouette over 70 years that seeing it on another queen is perhaps the most visible sign that one era has ended and another has truly begun. It raises a delicate question. Is it too soon to bring back such a deeply personal icon? Or is it the duty of the new queen to ensure these symbols continue to shine? If Granny's tiara was a legacy, the next piece in our closed vault was a personal creation. This is the Burmese ruby tiara, and it holds a special distinction. It is one of the few major tiaras that Elizabeth II commissioned herself rather than inheriting. By 1973, the Queen decided she needed a new ruby tiara. To make it, she made a ruthless decision that might shock jewelry purists today. She dismantled the Nizam of Hyderabad tiara, a magnificent Cartier floral piece given to her as a wedding present, to harvest its diamonds. She combined these stones with a collection of rubies she had received as a wedding gift from the people of Burma. The design she chose was deeply symbolic. The rubies were set in motifs of heraldic roses, but the stones themselves carried a specific meaning from their donors. According to traditional Burmese beliefs, rubies possess the power to protect the wearer from illness and evil. This tiara became a staple of her wardrobe from the 1970s onwards, yet she never lent it to anyone. It remained exclusively hers. I often wonder if the reason for this was rooted in that protective symbolism, making it feel more like a private talisman than a piece of state jewelry. However, looking at the collection as a whole, a broader pattern emerges that makes me think it was simply a matter of personal ownership. Elizabeth II rarely shared the pieces she commissioned or purchased herself. The magnificent Brazilian aquamarine tiara and the Belgian sapphire tiara, which she had converted from a necklace, were also never seen on other royal ladies. It seems that, while she was happy to share the family heirlooms, the jewels she built for herself were part of a private, modern uniform that she was not yet ready to pass on. Finally, we arrive at the grandest survivor in the Queen's collection, the Vladimir tiara. This piece has a history that reads like a thriller. It originally belonged to Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna of Russia, a leading society hostess of the Romanov court. When the Russian Revolution broke out, the Grand Duchess fled, but her jewels were left behind in a hidden safe in her bedroom at the Vladimir Palace. In the summer of 1917, a British art dealer and friend of the family, Bertie Stopford, embarked on a secret mission. Disguised as a workman, he sneaked into the palace, retrieved the jewels, and smuggled them out of Russia in a pair of Gladstone bags. The tiara, damaged during its perilous journey, was eventually sold by the Grand Duchess's daughter to Queen Mary, who had it repaired by Gerard. But the true genius of the Vladimir tiara lies in its versatility. It consists of interlocking diamond circles that can hold different pendants. Queen Mary, with her usual eye for innovation, had it adapted to hold not just the original pearls, but also the Cambridge emeralds. Elizabeth II inherited the Vladimir in 1953 and wore it throughout her entire reign, right up until 2019. It was a heavy, majestic piece, and she managed the mechanics of it with the help of her dresser, Angela Kelly. Kelly revealed that swapping the drops was a high-stakes operation. The pearls and emeralds were kept in numbered pouches, and the switch took about an hour. Kelly noted that she never wore gloves during the process, needing a firm grip to ensure the precious stones didn't slip while being hooked into the diamond frame. Like the Burmese ruby, the Vladimir was never seen on anyone else during Elizabeth's lifetime. It was a queen-level diadem, reserved for the woman at the top of the hierarchy. The queen wore it three ways: with pearls, with emeralds, or widowed, without any drops at all. Which version do you think carries the most majesty? I have my own favorite, but I would love to read yours in the comments. This next section contains jewels defined by their sheer, staggering worth. These are the pieces that are not just reserved, but operate in a stratosphere of their own. We begin with a brooch that carries perhaps the most amusing nickname in royal history, Granny's Chips. It was cut by the Asher brothers in Amsterdam. While the two largest stones were set in the sovereign's scepter and the imperial state crown, these smaller sections have a slightly different history. They were actually purchased from the Ashers by the South African government and then presented to Queen Mary as a gift in 1910. The nickname is a bit of dry royal humor. The Ashers referred to these secondary stones as chippings, the leftovers from the main cut. But these leftovers are monstrous. Cullinan 3 is a pear-shaped diamond weighing 94.4 carats, and Cullinan 4 is a square-cut diamond of 63.6 carats. Together, they form a brooch that weighs over 150 carats. Queen Mary, with her typical disregard for minimalism, wore them everywhere. She pinned them to her bodice. She even hooked them into her Delhi Durbar tiara for the Durbar in 1911. But when Elizabeth II inherited them in 1953, she treated them with far more caution. The reason these remained forbidden to everyone else for 70 years is simple: status. Cullinan 1 and 2 are the centerpieces of the sovereign's scepter and the imperial state crown. Because Granny's chips are the direct siblings of the stones in the formal regalia, they carry an aura of state authority. Elizabeth II treated these diamonds as the ultimate queen-only badge. Lending them would be like lending a fragment of the crown itself. During her reign, they remained the ultimate weapon in her jewelry arsenal, reserved for the woman who sat on the throne, and her alone. From the blindingly bright, we move to the romantic and historically complex, the oriental circlet. This tiara is a testament to the love between Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Albert designed it himself in 1853, inspired by the Indian jewelry presented to Victoria by the East India Company at the Great Exhibition. It is a delicate architectural piece featuring lotus flowers and Mughal arches. Queen Victoria's will was explicit about this jewel. She designated it an heirloom of the crown, intended to be worn by future queens. By that logic, it should have passed directly to Elizabeth II in 1952. But here, family affection overruled protocol. The Queen Mother adored this tiara. It was one of her signature pieces, and she wore it constantly throughout her widowhood. Elizabeth II, realizing how much her mother loved it, decided not to claim it. She allowed the Queen Mother to keep it until her death in 2002. Once the piece finally returned to the main vault, however, Elizabeth II applied Victoria's instruction with characteristic precision. This explains why the tiara effectively went into lockdown. Elizabeth II respected the hierarchy implicitly. Elizabeth herself wore it on exactly one occasion in her entire reign, a state banquet in Malta in November 2005. After that single outing, she returned it to the vault, enforcing its status as a piece solely for the monarch or consort. For 20 years, it remained a forbidden object to everyone else in the family. But with a new reign, we are seeing a shift in these rigid protocols. In December 2025, for the German state banquet at Windsor Castle, the oriental circlet finally reappeared, not on a queen, but on a future queen. The Princess of Wales, Catherine, made her debut in the piece. It was a stunning moment, not just for the sparkle, but because it signaled that the strict, literal rules of the Elizabethan era are beginning to evolve. Let's move on to the pieces that fell victim to the most ruthless force in royal life: time and changing fashion. Queen Mary and Queen Alexandra defined the Edwardian look with the collier de chien, the wide, diamond dog collar that encased the neck like armor. It was a look that required a specific silhouette, a specific hairstyle, and perhaps a specific attitude to pull off. But as the 20th century progressed, necklines dropped and jewelry became lighter. Consequently, two of the most complex jewels in the collection spent Elizabeth II's entire reign in the dark. The first is Queen Mary's Love Trophy Collar. Commissioned around 1901, this is a gold-set marvel of rectangular panels featuring torches, quivers, and bows, the trophies of Cupid. For decades, this piece was a myth to us. We knew it survived because it was photographed for reference books, but it was never worn. However, we recently got a closer look. In April 2025, the necklace was finally brought out of the vault for the Edwardians Age of Elegance exhibition at the King's Gallery. Seeing it under museum lights confirmed that it is a heavy, intricate masterpiece, perhaps too rigid for modern wear, but undeniable in its craftsmanship. The same cannot be said for Queen Alexandra's collier réussi. This was a commission from Cartier in 1904, and it is a technical wonder. Réussi translates to fishnet, and the diamonds are set in a flexible lattice that hugs the neck like fabric. Queen Mary wore it often, modifying it to be an all-diamond honeycomb. But unlike the Love Trophy, the Réussi has not been exhibited or seen in decades. It remains a ghost. Personally, I would love to see this diamond net rescued from the vault. Can you imagine it on the long, elegant neck of the Princess of Wales? It would be a breathtaking revival for a future queen. Another item was a victim of changing silhouettes, the diamond stomacher. A stomacher is a massive, rigid ornament designed to be pinned to the stiff bodice of a corseted gown. They are notoriously difficult to wear today. Elizabeth II actually owned a magnificent one, a wedding gift from Queen Mary, but she found it so impractical that she wore it in its complete form only once, for her Golden Jubilee dinner in 2002. Far more often, we saw only the bottom section, the smallest and most versatile element, worn separately as a brooch. So it was a genuine surprise when, in December 2023, Queen Camilla appeared at the diplomatic reception wearing a completely different stomacher. This was a piece we didn't even know existed in the royal vaults. It is a Belle Epoque jewel with diamond tassels, almost certainly part of the Greville bequest left to the Queen Mother in 1942. Think about that timeline. The Queen Mother received it, likely never wore it, and left it in a box. Elizabeth II inherited it and left it in the box. It sat in the dark for 80 years, simply waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. But not every story in the vault has a happy ending. Finally, we must discuss a piece that may have been lost not to fashion, but to the fragility of the materials themselves. The Queen Mother's Pearl Sautoir. This was a wedding gift to the young Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon from the City of London in 1923. It was a spectacular long necklace composed of 5 rows of pearls mounted on platinum wire. The new Duchess of York wore it for her early portraits in 1924, and then... silence. It has not been seen in a century. Why would such a significant gift disappear? One of my viewers shared a very insightful theory that made me think about its specific construction. They pointed out the potential problem with that combination of materials over a long period. Pearls are soft, organic gems. To stay lustrous and healthy, they need moisture and gentle handling. Platinum wire, conversely, is incredibly hard and unyielding. It's quite possible that after 100 years of storage, the necklace's condition has simply deteriorated due to the abrasion between these two materials. It's a sobering thought that some jewels, unlike diamonds, are not eternal. But I like to believe that it is simply waiting, tucked away in a box, for its moment to return to the light. We have looked at jewels restricted by status, by signature, and by the whims of fashion. But what about the pieces in the gray area? Those with no strict rules, which become forbidden through the sheer force of a single monarch's preference. The most compelling example of this is Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee necklace. Its story began with a contentious committee gift. For Victoria's Golden Jubilee in 1887, a group of aristocratic women called the Daughters of the Empire raised funds for a tribute. They were so successful that they ended up with a massive surplus, which led to heated arguments over how to spend the extra money. Ultimately, it was decided that a portion of the surplus would be used to commission this magnificent diamond and pearl necklace from Carrington & Co., which was presented in 1888. Victoria adored it, and in her will, she designated it an heirloom of the crown. Now, this is a key distinction. The wording is different from the oriental circlet's strict command to be worn by future queens. An heirloom of the crown designation is primarily about ownership. It secures the piece for the institution of the monarchy, but leaves its use more to the discretion of the reigning monarch. Theoretically, it could be lent. And for half a century, it was treated with far less reverence. After Victoria, it fell into a long slumber. Queen Mary, with her pragmatic eye, saw it not as a sacred whole, but as a source of useful parts. She pinned the smaller trefoil links to her hats. For half a century, its identity as a grand necklace was lost. It was Elizabeth II who resurrected it. She wore the necklace in its complete original form and elevated it to one of the most important pieces in her collection. It became a workhorse for state occasions, worn as consistently as her signature tiaras. And in doing so, she single-handedly raised its status. Through constant, high-profile wear, she transformed it from a forgotten heirloom into an emblem of her reign. She created a new, unwritten rule. This necklace is part of the monarch's personal uniform. Thus, it landed on our forbidden list not by Victoria's decree, but by Elizabeth's choice. And this makes its future particularly intriguing. After the state opening of Parliament in 2016, it disappeared again. Has Elizabeth II's long tenure permanently elevated it to queen-level status? Or will it, in this new era, be seen as available for the Princess of Wales? For now, it seems to have returned to the Forbidden Vault. Looking back at this list, you realize that being the custodian of such a vast collection is an act of careful curation. There is a clear hierarchy for what can and cannot be lent. Some pieces, like the George IV diadem and the Coronation necklace, are part of the monarch's uniform, strictly off-limits. Others become a personal signature, so tied to one person that they are effectively reserved. And some jewels fall out of rotation, not due to rules, but because their time has simply passed. Queen Elizabeth II understood this distinction perfectly. She knew which jewels were for the high ceremony of state, and which served as her personal emblem of reign. She drew a clear line between the jewels of a woman and the regalia of a monarch. Now, we see that forbidden vault slowly opening. Pieces like the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara and the oriental circlet have begun their new lives with Queen Camilla and the Princess of Wales. Others, like the pearl sautoir, may be lost to history forever. But the new era will bring new debuts, and I, for one, am fascinated to see what they will bring out of the boxes next. If you enjoyed this journey into the Forbidden Vault and the discovery of jewels that remained the Queen's exclusive signature for 7 decades, please give this video a like. It truly helps the channel grow. And please, tell me in the comments, which of these forbidden jewels would you most like to see on Queen Camilla or the Princess of Wales? Personally, I'm still hoping to see the Vladimir tiara with its emeralds. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you soon.